Welcome back. We start our news bulletin from Pakistan, where Prime Minister Imran Khan says he has approached United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres to stop India from changing occupied Kashmir's demography. In a series of tweets, Khan said the attempts to alter the valley's demographic structure are illegal and against the United Nations Security Council resolutions. Khan said the Indian actions violate the international laws, including the 4th Geneva Convention. He said India must be stopped from the unacceptable path that further usurps the internationally guaranteed rights of the Kashmiri people. Khan said the Indian actions seriously imperil peace and security of South Asia. New Delhi has issued domicile certificates of Kashmir to 25,000 Indians so far. Meanwhile, in Indian-occupied Kashmir, occupation forces have martyred 2 more youths in the Islamabad district. Indian troops targeted civilians during a cordon and search operation in Vagama area of the district. The operation is still underway in the area. Yesterday, the Indian forces killed 3 Kashmiri youth in the Runipora district. Indian atrocities in the occupied valley have sharply increased despite the COVID-19 outbreak. The valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 331 days. China says it will take retaliatory measures in response to U.S. decision to start eliminating Hong Kong's special status under American law. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said this is a day after the U.S. said it's halting defense exports to Beijing over the new Hong Kong law. Protests have erupted in the city after reports of Beijing ratifying the controversial national security laws. Meanwhile, Beijing State Council Information Office said a media briefing regarding the security legislation will be held tomorrow. However, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam refused to respond to queries on the legislation, saying sanctions will not scare her administration.
The meeting is about protecting Hong Kong and setting up a national security legislation. In the last 2 days, there have been many reports about the clauses or how manpower will be set up. I don't think it is not appropriate to respond to any questions or make any explanations.
Meanwhile, the United Kingdom responded to unconfirmed reports of passage of the security law, saying China has made a grave step. Now, moving on, Brazil has reported 692 deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, raising the toll to over 58,000. The United States has recorded more than 40,000 cases overnight for the 4th time in the past 5 days, as the country risks becoming the virus epicenter again. The global number of deaths from the virus has crossed 504,000, with infections around 10.3 million. More details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic is accelerating every day, with new record cases being reported in almost every part of the world. States in the U.S. are pausing reopening plans amid a surge in coronavirus cases and hospitalizations. Los Angeles County says it is becoming the new COVID-19 hotspot within the U.S., despite curbs on nightlife. Arizona Governor Doug Ducey has ordered the closure of hospitality sector.
Today's executive order will pause the operation of bars, gyms, movie theaters, water parks, and tubing, effective at 8 p.m. today, with a targeted reopening date in 30 days.
The European Union has named 14 countries whose citizens are deemed safe to be let in from July 1st, despite the pandemic. Those named include Australia, Canada, Japan, Morocco, South Korea, but excludes the US, Brazil, and China. Nigeria and Senegal have also eased some restrictions that were imposed to stem the spread of the coronavirus, while the state of South Australia has cancelled plans to reopen its border to interstate travelers from neighboring Victoria after a spike in infections there. The World Health Organization warns the pandemic is not even close to being over.
We all want this to be over. We all want to get on with our lives. But the hard reality is, this is not even close to being over. Although many countries have made some progress, globally, the pandemic is actually speeding up.
Elsewhere, China has reported 19 new cases of coronavirus compared with 12 the day before. 7 of the new cases are in Beijing, where a mass testing campaign is underway after an outbreak began in the capital's main wholesale food market.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has crossed 4,300 with 118 more fatalities in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said over 2,800 cases were reported overnight, bringing the total to over 209,000. It said so far over 98,500 people have recovered, while nearly 2,700 remain critical. The ministry said about 107,000 cases are active in the country. It said the province of Punjab reported most overnight infections with 1,727 cases. The Sindh province reported over 1,300 infections, while the capital, Islamabad, registered 128 infections. Now, Russia has accused the US of taking a destructive stance over the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The US has signed but not ratified the treaty, while Russia ratified the treaty 20 years ago. Russia's foreign ministry also accused the US of preparing for a possible resumption of nuclear testing. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to address the UN Security Council on the expiration of a UN arms embargo on Iran today. The Taliban and the US have virtually discussed the implementation of Doha deal and start of intra-Afghan talks. The group's spokesman Suhail Shaheen said their leader Mullah Brother Akhund also discussed the withdrawal of US troops with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Shaheen quoted Brother saying the delay in the release of Taliban prisoners has lingered on the intra-Afghan talks. Brother assured Pompeo that Afghan soil will not be used against the security of the United States and other countries. He also called on the US to release Haji Bashar and remaining Afghan detainees at the Guantanamo Bay. Earlier, Brother, along with his delegation, met Iranian Special Representative for Afghanistan to discuss refugees and border issues. Meanwhile, the Taliban have released 20 Afghan soldiers and police officers in Kunduz province under the Doha peace deal. In Yemen, 16 Houthi rebels and 2 soldiers have been killed in clashes in Marib and Al-Hudaydah provinces. In a statement, the military said the rebels attacked Haiz district south of Al-Hudaydah. The military said it killed 9 rebels and wounded several others in Al-Hudaydah. It said another clash broke out between the rebels and government troops in Hashia district of Marib province. 7 militants and 2 soldiers were killed in the hours-long clash in Marib. Yemen has been entangled in violence and chaos since 2014 after Houthis overran much of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. Nigeria says it has killed scores of Boko Haram militants in multiple airstrikes in the country's northeastern state of Borno. In a statement, the military said the operation followed days of aerial surveillance missions in Warshale settlement. It said the missions conducted by 2 military jets found the group was using the settlement to launch attacks. The statement said the military also destroyed several structures in the camp of Boko Haram. Since 2009, Boko Haram has been targeting northeastern Nigeria, extending its attacks to countries in the Lake Chad basin. The UN Security Council has unanimously voted to extend the mandate of its 7-year peacekeeping force in Mali for another 12 months. The renewal of the mission allows the number of its members to continue to comprise up to nearly 13,300 soldiers and over 1,900 police officers. It also commits to presenting a possible exit strategy for the mission by March 2021. Despite the presence of thousands of UN troops, the violence has engulfed the center of the country and spread to neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger. The UN said the attacks have grown 5-fold in the last 4 years, with 4,000 people killed in 2019, up from about 770 in 2016. Now, Venezuela has ordered the EU envoy to leave the country hours after Brussels sanctioned 11 Caracas administration officials. In a televised address, President Nicolas Maduro gave European Union's diplomat Isabel Brilhant Pedrosa 72 hours to leave the country. Maduro also lashed out against Spain's ambassador to Caracas, Jesus Silva. Maduro accused him of participating in the failed April 2019 bid to overthrow him, led by Leopoldo Lopez, and the botched raid in May.
Venezuela reserves diplomatic actions against the Spanish ambassador in Venezuela for his participation in the armed incursion of Mesuto and his complicity with criminal acts that the Wall Street Journal denounced by Mr. Leopoldo Lopez. Expect news in the next few hours.
Food security has lately risen to the top of the national agenda in Cuba, with countless news headlines dedicated to the topic. So the government has called on citizens to grow more of their own food. More in this report.
Cuba imports roughly 2/3 of the food it consumes at a cost of around $2 billion annually. But the imports have nosedived in recent years as aid from ally Venezuela shrank following its economic implosion and U.S. embargo. The communist government has called for citizens to grow food in whatever spaces they can find, from backyards to balconies.
I think it's great, but this can't happen only when we have a crisis. It has to be a way of life. Because then when we come out of the crisis, we return to consumerism, to depending on that chain. I think it's great, but it should be promoted, not just in time of crisis, but as a healthy, independent lifestyle.
The coronavirus pandemic, which has paralyzed the key tourism sector, has only exacerbated the situation.
When I saw the situation of the pandemic here in the country, I decided to use a part of our land to plant. The only thing I feel is that the idea came to me a little late, but since we are not doing anything in the temple, I'm going to do a short cycle of 6 months maximum. And I planted yucca, corn, chives, garlic, and leek.
Some Cuba observers are cautiously hopeful the crisis will push the government to reform its agricultural model, which, like the rest of the economy, remains heavily centralized.
Colombia has seized 1.2 tons of cocaine at its northern port of Cartagena. Defense Minister Carlos Holmes said the drugs, worth nearly $73 million, were bound for Europe. Trujillo said the bust showed the government was making progress in disrupting the drug business. The authorities said the shipment was hidden in a container headed for Germany. Officials said intelligence works into a drug trafficking organization involved in drug trade led to the seizure. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, Beijing has expressed concerns over India's decision to ban Chinese mobile apps, saying it will make checks to verify the situation. At a media briefing in Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said India has a responsibility to uphold the rights of Chinese businesses. This comes after New Delhi banned 59 Chinese mobile apps, including TikTok, UC Browser, and WeChat, citing security concerns. The Indian Ministry of Information said the apps are prejudicial to the security of the state and public order. The ban follows a deadly border conflict between the two nuclear-armed nations earlier this month. Meanwhile, in China, scientists have discovered a new strain of swine flu which is capable of triggering a pandemic. This was revealed in a study published in the U.S. science journal PNAS. The study said the virus strain possesses all the essential hallmarks of being highly adapted to infect humans. Researchers said the virus can mutate further, which can then spread easily from person to person. The new virus is named G4 and is genetically descended from the H1N1 strain that caused a pandemic in 2009. The International Atomic Energy Agency says a slight increase in radiation in air above northern Europe poses no threat to people's health and the environment. In a statement, the agency said 33 countries informed the organization that no release of nuclear isotopes had taken place on their territory. It said IAEA will continue its efforts to analyze collected information in order to identify the possible origin and location of the release. The agency said the levels reported to the IAEA are very low and pose no risk to human health and the environment. Meanwhile, the Kremlin said Russian system of radiation safety monitoring also detected no threatening situation in the country's northwest. France has announced an investment package of nearly $17 billion to accelerate a switch to green economy. Macron says he aims to move faster on environment-friendly policy making. Macron said he is ready to call a referendum on revising the constitution to include climate aims if the parliament allowed it. Macron said France continues to evaluate the comprehensive economic and trade agreement with Canada. He said an environmental bill will be drafted and presented to lawmakers by the end of summer to advance France's ecological transition goals.
The state will do all its part. That's why, starting with the economic recovery plan that we're preparing, an additional 15 billion euros in the next 2 years will be allotted for ecological transition of our economy. We will put in place a green transformation plan for our economy in the recovery plan, with an underlying regard to a goal that has appeared in all your proposals.
Now, scientists say the South Pole has been warming at more than 3 times the global average over the past 30 years. In a new study, they say this could have huge implications for the melting of Antarctic ice sheets, marine life and the rising of global sea levels. More details in this report.
The South Pole, the most isolated and coldest part of the planet, is also one of the most rapidly warming ones. According to the study, the pole warmed by about 0.6 degrees Celsius per decade over the past 3 decades. The global average over that time was about 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. The warming is partly connected to naturally rising temperatures in the tropical Western Pacific. Researchers say the rest is due to human-induced climate change. Still, the South Pole is not yet in any danger of melting, as the year-round average temperature is still about minus 50 degrees Celsius. But the finding shows that no place is unaffected by change on a warming planet.
Now, Israel has pledged to annex some 30% of the West Bank, with a cabinet-level discussion on the move set to begin on 1st of July. A Palestinian has chosen art to reflect fears of what may happen to her isolated Bedouin community if Israel goes ahead with the annexation. In this report.
Amid the barren hills of the Jordan Valley, Palestinian artist Khadija Basharat paints scenes depicting women gathered around a demolished home and a yellow bulldozer, approaching a tin Bedouin shack. Some 15,000 Palestinians live in tiny pastoral encampments scattered across the valley. An Israeli military post near the Jewish settlements of Hamra looks down on Basharat's community from a nearby hilltop. The artist says she feels exposed to Israeli demolition of farm shacks.
We witness daily demolition, daily confiscation, occupation, searches, warrants. This is what we are exposed to on almost daily basis. This also reflects on how a person develops their ideas, specifically in drawings and paintings.
Peace Now, an Israeli advocacy group, opposes Tel Aviv's settlement policy and says most Palestinian applications for building permits are rejected. Basharat's husband says their community will be defiant in the face of Israeli annexation.
We will remain steadfast in our land. Initially, we will reject the whole idea of annexation completely. We will not agree to it. Even if it will be imposed on us, we will resist it with all the means we have.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's main coalition partner, Benny Gantz, signaled his opposition to advancing the annexation plan. But Netanyahu's spokesman said the Prime Minister told legislators from his party that his plan did not depend on Gantz's support.
United Kingdom's energy giant BP has sold off its petrochemicals business to Ioneers in a $5 billion deal. The sale follows BP's plans to sharply cut carbon emissions by 2050. In a statement, BP's chief Bernard Looney said the sale of the business, which employs 1,700 people, will come as a surprise. Looney said the proceeds from the sale will help BP to ease out capital other businesses. He said petrochemical plants attached to BP's oil refineries in Gelsenkirchen and Mülheim in Germany will not be sold. BP has stakes in manufacturing plants in the UK, US, Belgium, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Trinidad and Tobago. European stock markets are trading lower as concerns over the pandemic continue to weigh on investor sentiment. Banking stocks led the losses in the region, while technology stocks bucked the trend. London's FTSE 100 is trading nearly 1% lower. CAC 40 in Paris lost nearly 0.5%, while Frankfurt's DAX is trading fractionally lower. In Asia, Nikkei 225 led the gains, closing over 1% higher. Shanghai Composite and Seoul's Kospi Index gained nearly 1% each. Meanwhile, the international benchmark Brent crude oil has lost over 1%. Now it's time for the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can always follow us on social media at Indus News. Take care.